If we can feel free in any type of situation, that's the ultimate form of power and control. Do you ever feel stuck having to do something and not really being able to do anything about that? Well, perhaps you're experiencing an insecurity of power and control. What is an insecurity of power and control? Well, I'll define it as the difference between the type of power and control that we want, need, expect, or anticipate, and the amount of power and control that we perceive that we have. It could be wanting more power, but not having enough of that. So for instance, when my family first came to Canada and I was younger, I had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to deliver newspapers, come home, eat breakfast, go to school, come home, do my homework, eat dinner, and then go clean office buildings. And then the weekends, I'd have to do chores, clean the house, take care of my younger brother, go to church. I always felt a sense of obligation and duty. I wanted to sleep in. I wanted to go out and play with other kids. I wanted to buy things that I wanted, like Nike shoes, for instance. But I wasn't able to. And that made my body always tight because I felt trapped and I always felt angry about it. Now, the opposite can be true. A person can want and need less power, but they feel that they have too much power. So for example, younger children who are spoiled by their parents, they get everything they want. Their parents are always apologetic. Their parents are always saying, okay, you can do that, you're fine, don't worry about breaking everything in the house. Well, when a kid is the most powerful person in that room and everybody listens to them, they're going to feel scared. So if I'm this little person and I can't protect myself, but there's people around me, they are weaker than I am, I'm dead. So kids who have too much power actually become scared. So they act out, they throw tantrums because they want somebody to step in and say, no, I have more power than you. Because then they'll realize that somebody there is able to defend them against the rest of the world. Now, if there is an insecurity of power and control over a long period of time, or if there's a major discrepancy between what we want and what we actually have or what we perceive we have, then it can affect our minds, our bodies, and our relationships. So, for instance, me being in a position over many, many years, always having to do obligations for other people and fulfill my duties, that anger caused rifts in my relationships with people around me. Adults who are in high positions, like CEOs, they have to take responsibility for everything. There's nobody else higher than them to take responsibility for their decisions and their mistakes. So over time, they'll develop migraines and ulcers, or they might start using alcohol and drugs. So how do we increase our capacity to handle that insecurity of power and control so that we don't get to the point where our minds, our bodies, and our relationships are all messed up? Well, for one thing, we can change our beliefs or perceptions of power and control. In my life, I've been fortunate enough to have enough experiences to realize that too much power or too little power is not in all aspects of our lives. So, for instance, my parents had had a lack of control and power in their work when they first came to Canada. However, they did have power and control over me and my sister. Some people have power and control over their pets. Now, it is good for us to know that we do have power and control over other people. But it's not always the best idea to exercise our power and control over them because it does hurt them. But there's other things that we have power and control over. For instance, I feel that if I lack power in one thing, I do have power and control when I exercise. I'm telling my body to do something and it listens. So it actually makes me feel better about myself and my situation. I also realized that all things come to an end. So in my early 20s, I moved from one province in Canada to another. And that put a lot of distance between me and my parents. So their power over me in terms of controlling my obligations, my duties, and my activities was significantly lessened. And then I used that wisdom to tell my brother to not go to university in BC, but to move over to Ontario to go to school. Understanding that things do come to an end helped me to feel better about my lack of power and control. Now, besides changing how we perceive power and our expectations of power, there are things that we can do to gain more power and control or reduce our insecurity. So earlier on, I talked about exercise. We can also find champions and advocates to help us. Back when I was younger, even though I didn't belong or I didn't feel like I belonged with other kids and home life was very, very constricting, I always had teachers who wanted to listen to what I had to say because they respected my intelligence. And they always were supportive of me. I've also had neighbors who were some of the toughest kids in school that protected me against other people. So my resources were able to help me with my insecurity. I was also able to find other people who shared a similar experience with me. I thought I was alone, and that makes a lack of power and control much worse to experience. But as I talked to many different Asian people, I realized that they shared the exact same experience with me. And that camaraderie, that ability to feel not alone, helped me to feel better. Other things we can do is to create. Some people do arts and crafts. Some people do woodworking. Other people, they involve themselves in community theater where they act, and some of the roles are very powerful. That role play, that acting, actually does increase our feeling of power and control. Now, creating that feeling when role playing is actually quite important, because when there is an insecurity of power and control, be it having too much or having too little, it creates sensations in our bodies, be they tension in the chest, rumbling in our stomachs, tension or expansion of our face. When we describe those sensations to ourselves, it makes us more familiar with that experience. And it makes us more comfortable with the uncomfortable if we practice over a long period of time. So if we can tap into our resources and develop skills to change our beliefs and perceptions of power and control, to change the dynamic so that we get more or less power and control, and feel through the sensations and accept that there is an insecurity, then we don't feel as trapped. If we can feel free in any type of situation, that's the ultimate form of power and control. What strategies do you use to handle your insecurities of power and control? I'm curious to know.